Operation Aphrodite and Operation Anvil were huge failures. In fact, of the 15 missions involved, only one came close to its target. Nonetheless, one of these missions, the one on August 12, 1944, changed the course of U.S. history. Welcome to History, Mystery, and the Unexplained, the show where we look at everything from true crime to cryptids, the paranormal, and beyond. Today, we're going to look at the tragic events of this date in history and how it affected America's royal family. But before we get started, please like, subscribe, follow, or whatever on the platform of your choice. And be sure to give us a review. I'd love to hear what you think. The targets of this joint effort between the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Army Air Force included submarine hubs housing Germany's deadly U-boats, V-1 and V-3 rocket silos, oil refineries, and power plants. All of these targets could not be taken out by conventional weapons. They were deep underground, protected by layers upon layers of concrete. Today, drones and bunker busters are commonplace, but in the 1940s, remote control technology and wireless communication were still in their infancy. The plan was fairly simple. Take some old warplanes that reached their end of life, strip them down to bare bones so they weigh less, and then replace all that saved weight with as many bombs as they possibly could. Then simply fly those puppies remotely smack into the bunkers. Now, the problem with this was we didn't quite have the technology to get the planes off the ground without manual assistance. 2 pilots were needed to get the plane up in the air, turn on the autopilot, confirm remote operation, arm the bomb, and then bail out. While they were parachuting to safety, the plane would then be guided to its target. The target on August 12th was Fort Mimolek in German-occupied France. The pilots that day were Joe and Bud. Joe had already served 2 terms. He flew in 25 combat missions and was eligible to return home, yet he volunteered for this dangerous mission. There's a lot of speculation as to why. Either he simply was a great patriot who wanted to give his all for his country, or it was a bit of sibling rivalry. His brother, John, had just received a bit of fame and recognition in America after rescuing the crew of his torpedo boat in the waters off the Solomon Islands. Honestly, it was probably a bit of both. He came from a very competitive family, and even if he was only 28, he had aspirations for the White House. Likewise, Bud pulled rank and so that he could be in the cockpit. Joe's normal co-pilot, James, was sidelined. This was the first of the Aphrodite missions that would involve Navy pilots. If successful, it would be a great victory for America, for the Allied forces, and for the Navy. Joe and Bud boarded their BQ-8 robot plane. This was a heavily modified B-24 Liberator, a type of heavy bomber that was nicknamed the Flying Coffin because it was cramped and heavy with low ceilings and a horrible safety record. And again, this was an end-of-life, stripped-down Flying Coffin loaded with 22,000 pounds of explosives. One of the major modifications, the removal of the glass dome that protected the pilot. This was done in part to reduce weight, but also so that the pilots had a way to escape. A standard B-24 only had a single entrance in the rear of the plane. Not exactly a quick exit option. The 2 were very experienced pilots. They rolled down the runway in the cumbersome behemoth, pulled back on the heavy controls, and lifted off the ground. In minutes, they joined the planes already in the air. The formation reached their designated altitude of 2,000 feet. Joe engaged the autopilot and notified the navigation ship. "We have control." The radio crackled back. They banked to the right off the coast of the North Sea, then leveled out. This was the cue to prep for ejection. After the first remote control turn, Joe pulled the ignition pin, arming the weapons. Spade flush, he said into the radio. That was the predetermined code to notify that everything was going according to plan, until suddenly everything wasn't. Moments later, the plane exploded. The pilots had no time to escape, and both lost their lives. So why is this a significant moment in history? Joe's full name was Joseph Kennedy Jr. His brother, the one who famously saved his crew, was John F. Kennedy, who went on to become America's 35th president. From birth, there was an expectation that Joe would one day sit in the Oval Office. His grandfather, Boston Mayor John Fitzgerald, told his local paper that his grandson would be the first Catholic president. He was right, of course, but not about the right grandson. This tragic day was one of those butterfly effect moments in history, a single event that rippled through the future, altering many paths. And as for that bunker, unbeknownst to the Americans, the United Kingdom's Royal Air Force had already destroyed the site a month earlier with the use of their tall boy earthquake bombs as part of their program, Operation Crossbow. That's it for today, folks. Till next time, I'm Chris Grenowitz. This is History, Mystery, and the Unexplained. And thanks for listening.